Okay, so Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Basra Daf Test 12, Bava Basra 15, and we're going to start on the very bottom of Yudal and Mabeis. We're discussing who wrote the different books of Tanakh. So 2 lines from the bottom, the Gemara tells us David Kosov Sefer Tehillim, Al Yedei Asar Zakanim, that David wrote the book of Tehillim through 10 elders, meaning that there were 10 elders that contributed to writing the book of Tehillim with David HaMelech. And who are these 10 elders? They Adam Arishon, that Adam Arishon contributed. They Melchizedek from the time of Abraham. They Avram. They Moshe through Avram and Moshe. They Haman. We're going to discuss what that is. They Yedusan. They Asaph. They Shlosha B'nei Korach. So all these people were part of the 10 elders that helped David HaMelech write Sefer Tehillim. Yirmiyah Kosov Sifro v'Sefer Malachim. Jeremiah wrote his book, i.e. Jeremiah, and also the book of Kings, Vikinot, the book of Eicha. Chizkiah v'Siyaso Kosvo Yeshaya Mishlei Shir Hashirim v'Koheles. Chizkiah and his helpers wrote the book of Yeshaya. Why didn't Isaiah write his own book? Rashi says because Menashe killed him, and therefore he wasn't able to write his book because the prophets only wrote their books right before they died. So Chizkiah and his helpers wrote the book of Yeshaya, the book of Mishlei, Shir Hashirim, and Koheles. Because it says in Mishlei and Koheles, it says in Mishlei, Asher Tiku Anshe Chizkiyahu. And so therefore, because Chizkiyahu also helped him write Torah, and so therefore the book is called by his name. And Anshe Knes Agdola Kosvu, and Anshe Knes Agdola wrote Yechezkel, Shnei Masar, Daniel, Megillas Esther. Ezra Kotzav Sifro. Ezra wrote his book, the Iche Shel Divrei Hayamim Adlo, and he also wrote the genealogy of Divrei Hayamim until he came to his name, and that's when he stopped. My silent Rav, this is support for Rav. Damar Rabbi Yehuda Maravu. Oh, Ezra Mibavel, that Ezra did only went up from Babylon until he established his own lineage. And then he went up. And the Gemara asked the question, Uman Aske, then who completed it? Nehemiah ben Chaklayai. Nehemiah completed the book of Ezra. Amar Mar Yeshua Kosav Sifra Ushmona Psukim Shabbatorah. So it said in the Brisa that Joshua wrote his book, i.e. Joshua, and 8 verses from the Torah. So these are referring to the last 8 verses of the Torah. Tanya Kamanda Amar. So this brisa supports the position that says Shimon and Psukim Shabbatorah Yeshua Kosvan, that the last 8 verses of the Torah Joshua wrote, Tanya Vayamash Moshe Eved Hashem, that Moshe there died and he was a servant of God. Efshar Moshe Chai, is it possible that Moshe lived because of Vayamash Moshe? And he wrote, and Moshe died there. That's not possible. How could he die and still write the works? Or how could he live and write the works that he was dead? There's 2 different versions of the text. Ela Adkan Kosav Moshe. So up until this point in the book of the Torah, Moshe wrote it. Kosav Yoshua. From that point on, Yoshua wrote it. That's the position of Rabbi Yehuda. Amarli Rabbi Nachami, Amarlo Rabbi Shimon. Efshar Sefer Torah Chasar Osachas. Is it possible that there's a Torah missing 1 letter? B'ksiv Lakoach Sefer Torah Zeb. Moshe wrote the whole Torah. Ela Adkan Kodesh Baruch Hu Omer Moshe Omer V'Kosef. Up until the time God said it, and Moshe would say it and then write it. He would say the word before writing it. Some say that's why a sofer has to say each word before writing it. From this point on, God would say it, Moshe Kosev Bedema. Moshe wrote a Bedema. So the dispute, what does the word Dema mean? Some say it means he wrote it with tears. Some say he wrote it silently, that he didn't write it first. He didn't say it first before writing it. So he wrote it differently. It's called Sefer B'dio. So that's the pasuk from Jeremiah, which says, "It was blessed from his mouth, and it will be read to me, all of these words, and I will write it on the scroll with ink." So it's possible that that therefore Moshe wrote it, and then Joshua wrote it afterwards. And so we see from here, in this pasuk in Jeremiah, that so that he read it to me and then he repeated it. And that's how we see that that's the way that the prophets write it. That's the way Moshe was writing it also. So Kaman Azal Hadam Rav Shubar Ava Amar Rav Kido Amar Rav Shimon Psukim Shebator Yachid Koro son. So who is it like who says that the last 8 verses in the Torah that an individual reads them, meaning to say that you're not allowed to make a break in the last 8 verses of Torah? Lema Delok Rabbi Shimon. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not like Rabbi Shimon, and it's like Rabbi Yehuda that who says that since Moshe didn't write them, therefore it's different from the rest of the Torah. So Gemara says no. I feel with him Rabbi Shimon. You could even say it's like Rabbi Shimon, Hol Vishtanu, since he wrote it with Dama, since he wrote it with tears or silently, then Hol Vishtanu was changed, so it was written differently, and so therefore we can't make a break. It says the pasuk Yoshua Kosav says the Gemara Yoshua Kosav Sifro. Did Joshua really write his Sefer? It says that Joshua died in his book. So the Gemara says the Askei Elazar. No, that Elazar the Kohen finished it. Elazar ben Aaron makes, but Elazar died. The Gemara says the Askei Pinchas, because Pinchas came along and finished it. Shmuel Kosav Sefer. Did Shmuel really write his work? Shmuel Mace. It says that Shmuel died. The Askei God because God the prophet finished it. V'natan HaNavi, and also Natan the prophet. David Kosav Sefer Tehillim L'idei Asar Zakenim. So David wrote the book of Tehillim through 10 elders. L'chshov Nami Eitan Azrachi. What about Eitan Azrachi? Why don't we count him amongst the 10? So Amarav Eitan Azrachi Zeu Avram. No, that he's really the same person as Abraham. Ksiv Hach Eitan Azrachi Ksiv Hasam Mi Yair Mi Mizrach Tzedek. So Avram is also referred to in Isaiah as being someone who came from the Mizrach. So therefore, that's also Eitan Ezrachi. Kachashem Moshe, Kachashem Haman. So you count Moshe as one of the 10, and also count Haman. V'amarav. Haman's in Moshe, but isn't Haman also Moshe? Ksivacha Haman. It says here in the book of Tehillim, it says Maskil Haman Ezrachi. And it says that he's the most trusted person who is the Eved of Hashem. So we say Trey Haman Havu. There are 2 Hamans that basically they're 2 different people. Trey Moshe Kosav Sifra Uparshas Bilam. Moshe wrote his Sefer, and also the passage of Bilam, which is in it, which is unique in the Torah, that it has nothing to do with the Jewish people. It's just like there's no part of the Jewish people, so we might have thought that Moshe didn't write it, so we're being told that Moshe wrote it as well. The Eov, and he also wrote the book of Job. Messiah Rabbi Levi Bar Lachma. So once we're saying Moshe wrote the book of Job, this is support for Rabbi Levi Bar Lachma, not Rabbi Levi Bar Lachma. Eov b'mei Moshe, that Eov was written. Eov lived in the time of Moses. Ksiv hacha mi'tein efo v'yichtavun. It says mi'tein efo v'yikatvun milai mi'tein b'sefer v'yuchaku. So, and then it says also ubama yedo efo. And so we see from here that this is the same type of language, and so therefore we say Moshe wrote this book of Job. Maybe it was written in the time of Isaac. It says in the book, it says about Isaac that he says mi efohu. So we have the same language. Hatzad Tzad. Who was the one who caught this animal? Asu. Also maybe in time of Joseph, so the Gemara says no. We shouldn't assume that, because mi'tein b'sefer yukaku, because it says mi'tein b'sefer v'yuchaku, which is the language that's referring most to Job. Moshe tehikri machokek, because Moshe is the one who's called a machokek. Nasiv vayare shislo ki sham chalkas vayare shis. Kisham Chalkas Mechokek Safun. And that's a reference to Moshe Rabbeinu. Rava Amar, Rava says no, Eov Dimei Miragum Haya, that Eov says Job that Job was in the days of the spies. Which is spelled similar to Utz. Gemara says Midami Hachi Utz Hasam Eitz. They're not the same. One is Utz, one is Eitz. So the Gemara says no. Hachi Kamar Lahu Moshe Yisrael. Rava is saying this is what Moshe said to the Jewish people. Nishno also Adam Sheshnosav Aruchov Haruchos ke'etz, Magen al Doro ke'etz. There is there in the land of Canaan a person whose years are long like a tree, and he protects his generation like a tree. Yosef Ahume Rabbanan Kamed Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman Yosef V'Kamar Iyov Lo Haya V'Lo Nivra and Mashal Haya, that Job never was and never existed. He was just a parable. Wow, what a radical statement. So imagine this was one of the rabbis sat there and said this. And his name was Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani. He says he was a mashal. Why? What would be the point of this mashal? Rashi says the whole purpose of it was that the whole purpose was to give a response to those who come and prosecute for the midas adin, and that there's nobody who he was able to respond to the pain. And they say there's nobody who can't withstand the terrible misfortunes in life. And so therefore Job was the person who was able to withstand it. So it was basically a parable according to Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani. So they say no, it says that there was a man in the land of Uz, and his name was Job. So it says but we know that there are parables, even though they refer to a specific person in the book of Shmuel, that when Natan Navi comes to David HaMelech and he rebukes him, he says that there was a parable of a man. And so we see from here that there are parables, even though it's not a specific person. So that doesn't mean that just because it says there was a man in the land of it doesn't mean that he was actually there. That could be an actual, it could just be a parable. So if that's the case, the Gemara says, I want to say his name and his name of the city. So Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar, they say Eov was one of the people who came up from the exile, who based Midrash B'Tveria, and his base Midrash was in Tiberias. So they say we have a contradiction. It says the time of the Eov lived from the time that they left Egypt until the time they came into the land of Israel. No, mainly it's the same amount of time. Gemara again is trying to challenge this idea that of who Eov was. It says that there were 7 prophets who prophesied for the nations of the world. They were Bilam and his father, Eov, and then the others who lived in the time of Eov. Eliphaz Timani, Dodar HaShuchit, Sofar Namati, Eliyahu ben Bracha, Hakuzi, Utamech. According, so Gemara first interrupts this brisa and says, according to you, Eliyahu ben Bracha, Avmi Yisrael, Haveva, Ktiv mi Mishpachas Ram. So how can you say Eliyahu was not from the Jewish people? It says Mishpachas Ram. He prophesies for the nations of the world. It just means that he prophesied for the nations of the world, even though he was Jewish. The Gemara says, no, all the prophets prophesied for the nations of the world. So the Gemara says, no. In that case, the main prophecy, in most cases, the main prophecy was for the Jewish people. The main prophecy was for the Jewish people, and the ancillary prophecy was for the nations of the world. But in the case of Eliyahu, then he gave the main prophecy was for Hasam. In the case of the other prophets, in these 7 cases, the prophets were mostly for the nations of the world. So this explains how Job could have been from the Ole Bava, Ole Goa, even though one brisa says he was not Jewish. So the Gemara again challenges Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar, who say that Eov was Jewish. Meisvei that there was a prophet from the nations of the world, and Job was the name. The only reason why he was here was because he was to receive his reward. So so God brought upon him afflictions, from the God, if he began to curse. Kafel HaKadosh Baruch Hu tzar b'olam hazeh, k'dei l'tar dem olam haba. So God gave him double the reward in this world to take him out of the next world, meaning to say to punish him in the world to come. So we don't know, was Eov Jewish or not Jewish? So tonight, this is a dispute. Rebbe Lazar says Eov b'mei shvot hashoftim haya. One brayso says Eov lived in time of judges. It says Hein atem kolchem chazitim l'ama zeh hevel te'abalu. So it says, have you not seen that? Why do you act in this false manner? What's the generation which is completely false? This is the generation of the judges. So they were all, and so therefore, this is the generation of the time of the judges. Rabbi Shimon Karcha says, Eov b'mei Achashverosh haya. Eov was in time of Achashverosh, because it says, "Well, nimtzah nashim yafos kivnos Yisrael, Eov b'chol haaretz." There's no women as beautiful as daughters of Job in all of the earth. Ezer Dorshan Mishpakesh Bo Nashim Yafos, which is the generation which sought out beautiful women. Avilomer said Dorosh Achashverosh is the generation of Achashverosh, because they did a search for all the beautiful women. So the Gemara says they will be made David. Maybe Job was in the time of David, because it says Vayivakshin Nara Yafa. They searched for a beautiful maiden. It says Hasim Chol Gvol Israel. There was in all the borders of Israel. Hacha B'chol Haaretz. There was in Achashverosh was in the whole land. Rabbi Nassan Omer Eov b'mei Malchus Shavaya. Eov was in the time of the kingdom of Shava, as it says Vatipol Shava Vatikachem. Shavem attacked and took. It says in the book of Job that Shava attacked and took his cattle. Eov b'mei Kasdim. Eov was in the time of the Kasdim. It says Kasdim Samu Shlosha Rashim. Some say Eov b'mei Yaakov Haya, because Eov was in the time of Jacob. It says V'dina bas Yaakov Nasa. Says he married the daughter of Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and you talk like one of the loathsome women. So Uksiv, which is a reference maybe to Dinah, Uksiv Hasam Kinivala Sabi Israel, because he had committed a nivala with Israel. Cool tonight, but all of these Tanaim say that Eov was Jewish, except for the last opinion, which say that he lived in the time of Jacob. Because it was from the nations of the world. After Moshe died, did the divine presence rest on the idolaters and killing people? But it says Moshe requested that there should no longer be any prophets amongst the idolaters, as it says, so the only one who says that Eov could have been amongst the Jewish people was the one who says he lived in the time of Jacob. The generation of Job was immersed in immorality, as it states, which means that they were immersed in, they were gazing at women. Maybe when it says chazita, it's not that they're gazing at women, but looking for God, because it says chazon Yeshayahu ben Amos. There's the vision of Isaiah, and where it says imkein lamazeh havel tebalu lamli. Why does it say havel tebalu? What does it say? It happened in the days when the judges judged. It means that this was the generation that judges. The judge would say to a defendant, remove your splinter from between your teeth. The defendant would say to the judge, remove the beam from before your eyes. If a judge said, your silver is sigim, meaning to say his dross, he would say, Amarlo, the defendant would say, Savech mahu, your wine is mixed with water. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Rabbi Yonasan, Ko Omer Malka Shava Isha, Isa Eino El Torah. Whoever says that the Malka Shava refers to a woman is making a mistake. My Malka Shava, what does it mean, Malka Shava? Malchus to Sheva, it's the monarch of Sheva. He was a king. So the Gemara says, let's go now through and analyze the book of Eov. It says, Vayhi Hayom Le'avo B'nei Elokim. Was he at Seif Al Hashem Vayavo Gam Satan B'socham? That the Satan came to argue with God. Vayomar Hashem Al Satan Me'ayin Tevo. Vayana Satan. God said to Satan, where are you coming from? Amar Lafanam, the saint said to God, Ribbon Shalom, Shatati b'chol kulo v'lo matzati ne'eman ka'avdecha Avram. Saint said before God, I went through the whole world, I didn't find anybody as loyal as Abraham. Shamartu lo kum misalech ba'aretz la'kol rachba kilcha nena. You said, go out through the land and I'll give it to you. V'afilu achi b'shashal matzah makom l'kor sarava. Al-Chakana Bedawan Meosh Kasef, Ohira Achamidosecha. Still, even though he couldn't find a place to bury Sarah until he had to pay for it, he didn't argue with you. Meaning to say, even though he couldn't find the burial spot, even though he promised him the land. God said, did you look at Eov? There's nobody like him in the whole land. That Eov was referred to in a greater manner than Abraham. By Avram it says, and now I know that you are one who fears God. By Eov it writes, you're a perfect upright man who fears God and eschews evil. So Eov is even greater than Avram. Eov was very liberal with his money. The normal way of the world was no same chatzi pruto l'chenvani. You give half a pruto to your shopkeeper, and you give the worker half. Basically, no same chatzi pruto l'chenvani. Eov vitra mishalo, but Eov gave up his own. He gave the entire pruto to the worker. Vayan hasatan es Hashem vayomer achinam yirei Eov elokim is. So Satan said, of course he's going to be nice to him. You gave him everything. What is it? And you blessed his house. What does it mean you blessed his house? Whoever took a pruta from Eov was blessed. What does it mean his possessions were spread throughout the land? The flocks of Eov breached the natural order of the world. Normally wolves kill the sheep, but Eov's sheep kill the wolves. So, okay, we'll stop here. God willing, we'll pick this up. And the next time, this is the beautiful daf, Bava Basra, Tev Vav.